This is the Other Rugby Pod with Reenen Stenekamp.
Let's kick off with the top 14. Here in South Africa, we know the URC, where we have teams from South Africa, Ireland, Italy, Scotland, Wales. In France, it's the top 14, so there's only 14 teams and they're all from France. In England, we've got Premiership Rugby, same thing. Less teams, but all teams from England. The big thing from the top 14 is it starts in August already and it finishes during the July internationals. The semi-finals and finals are being played while those internationals take place. And that is a contentious issue because the French rarely, if ever, send a full-strength team to compete in July. It's been in the news now that they're going to send, well, an under-strength team or a young team to New Zealand next year. And the All Blacks aren't happy about that. You don't want to dwell on that too much, but 2 years ago they sent a young team to Australia where they lost the first game very closely, and if memory serves, they won the next one. So, I don't know, that's only the Wallabies. We know where they are at the moment, not in a good space, but the All Blacks should just maybe make a mental note and remind themselves of what happened in Australia and focus on the ball and not off the field stuff. That is not all of it. There's more. There's much more to the French League. So let's dig in. Like I said, it's a longer competition, only French teams. But you've got players from all over the world that play in France. And the same happens in the URC, and the same happens in England. In the URC, you've got players from New Zealand going there on short-term deals. There's one at Leinster right now. You've got South Africans playing for other teams. RG Snyman played for Munster. He is now at Leinster. You've got Reino Smit, famous Sevens Springbok, also played plenty Super Rugby for the Sharks. He's been at Benetton for a couple of years now. So there's a lot to be said in that sense. It gives an opportunity for players all over the world to play in different leagues and play in different kinds of conditions. In my view, I think the top 14 is the strongest competition. It's dog eat dog every week. But that's not the only reason. It's if you look at the winners of the Champions Cup over the past couple of years, it's been pretty much, I could say, it was dominated by the French teams. La Rochelle has been very successful lately. Toulouse is successful often. And who better to make such a gauge than Rohan Pienaar, who played in the Currie Cup. He played in the top 14 indeed. He played in the URC and he played Super Rugby and he won a World Cup. But just on that level, he's been all over the world. And he's in a very good position, one would dare say, to make such a statement. And he said the top 14 for him was the toughest competition. The reason is interesting. He said it's because every week you get another Fijian who flattens you. He says it's a very, very physical league, and the Fijians are very physical, and they all play in France. The Drua does play Super Rugby, but they've got a very, very strong contingent in the top 14 and in the second division for that matter, the Pro D2. So he says for him it was an eye-opener. Every week is extremely physical and extremely tough. And that's why Rohan Pienaar said that the French league was the strongest one that he encountered. It's a very attractive league as well. If you look at the money that is in France, the players are paid exceptionally well. Same goes for Japan. They played well in Japan. They paid well in Japan as well. The yen is strong, but in France they paid exceptionally well. Just to use an example of the kind of money that walks around in France. They've got a salary cap, And for every month that a given team exceeds this salary cap, they must pay an amount of 200,000 euros to French rugby. For every month. So every month that you exceed, you pay 200,000 for that month, euros. Montpellier, the team that I support, has been paying that for years now. It's nuisance payment for them. Now just let that sink in. 200,000 euro. That is roughly 40 million rand every month to exceed the salary cap. They pay that as penalty. So, yeah, it's a very strong financial situation that league finds itself in. Teams are privately owned and funded, and that places pressure on several players, marquee players that are signed. Siya Kolisi comes to mind. He's been criticised before he left Racing Metro. But Siya is the kind of player who manages himself exceptionally well. When he plays for the Boks, he's at the top of his game. When his team, Racing at the stage, when the knockout phase comes, Siya Kolisi is at his best. So he manages himself, and when it matters, this guy, he plays big rugby. That goes without saying. But they don't want that in France. They want these players to be at their exceptional best every week, and that's not always attainable because these teams are privately owned. The owners aren't rugby men per se; they're businessmen, and they expect a lot from the players. They expect a lot from the coaches. Like I said, to be on top level every week, and that is not always achievable. And that's why there's such a big turnover in coaching staff. If after 6 months the results aren't there, then they're not interested in stories where you tell them, but look, building the team, building a squad, developing, etc. Results will come next year. They want it now. So it's a bit cutthroat in that sense, but that's France, isn't it? Like in every league, you have strong teams and weaker teams. The strong teams in France are well known. You've got Toulouse, Bordeaux, Toulon, Stade Francais, and the likes of La Rochelle and Castres. La Rochelle, no one other than legendary Springbok Gurthro Steenkamp, also 2007 World Cup winner, 3-time Super Rugby winner with the Bulls. He is scrum coach at La Rochelle. He won plenty of trophies with Toulouse, by the way, when he was still playing for them. The weaker teams, there you have the like of Perpignan, Vannes, and my team, unfortunately, Montpellier, and that just shows you also the volatility of the league, because 3 years ago we won the top 14. And last season we played promotion and relegation to stay up. So it's a league that it's never the same. It makes it very interesting. It's never the same. Like a good example will be a comparison with the URC, where Leinster is strong every year. Now, all right, you've got the likes of La Rochelle is strong every year, but you've got much more volatility. Bordeaux hasn't always been there. They've now been there for 2 years, and they're strong. But the question is, are they going to keep it up? So it's very interesting. It's never, no week is always like the same as any other week. Lately, there's been a lot of English players. There's been a bit of an English influx in the top 14. You've got the like of Sam Simmons at Montpellier. You've got Zach Mercer, who was at Montpellier, is now going to Toulon. You've got a guy like Owen Farrell, who plays for Racing Metro. By the way, he played this weekend and was completely invisible. I watched the game. We'll get to that in a bit. But Owen Farrell was, I don't think I heard his name once, and I didn't see him once. So he's definitely still finding his feet in that league. But if we have a quick look at South Africans in France, who play in the top 14 specifically, you've got the likes of Marvin Orie, who's a Springbok. He plays at Perpignan. Uzair Cassiem is at Bayonne. Uzair, also a Springbok player. Then you've got Tapiwa Mafuda, the winger who plays for Montpellier. Until last season he was with Bordeaux. You've got Kobus Reinach, also at Montpellier. Kobus played a critical role in the box, winning the rugby championship now. He started or came off the bench in just about every game, so he was instrumental in us winning that competition. You've got Nicolaas Janse van Rensburg, who was also part of the bigger squad for the whole of the, not the whole, but most of the rugby championship. He plays lock and or flank. And then a guy that's maybe a little bit forgotten, but has not lost a centimetre of speed, Serfontein, who's also been at Montpellier for quite a while now, plays scintillating rugby. At Lyon, there's Arno Botha, scored a try for them last week. Asina Dayimani at Racing Metro. And like I said, also the Englishman Owen Farrell is there. We'll see how he grows into it, but he's been finding it not that easy initially. JJ van der Mescht at Stade Francais, he was with the Sharks until 2021. At Bordeaux, until about, I think just more than a year ago, Joseph Dweba was there at Bordeaux. But you also now have the Rohan Janse van Rensburg and Carlu, who both are well-known players in South Africa. They play for Bordeaux in France. So yeah, if you look at the results that we had this past weekend, the game that I watched was Vaughan against Racing Metro. Vaughan promoted to the top 14 at the end of last season. When they were still in the Pro D2, they signed a couple of big names, and they're barking with the big dogs now. They played against a struggling Racing Metro at home. In the end, they lost by 27-24, but I was very impressed with Vaughan. They've got dogfight in them. They're going to be no pushover this year. And if any of the African teams meet them in the Challenge Cup, it will be interesting to see how that goes, because you can take my word on it. These guys are here to play. They're not here to just make up the numbers, which is always good to see. Stade Francais beat my beloved Montpellier. We also lost last week. I think to Racing Metro it was. I can't remember exactly, but we've now lost 2 on the trot, so we better turn that around. The pressure will be on. We don't want to play. Promotion relegation again and tempt fate. We've already done it once, so we better turn it around. It's a long season, long way to go, but last year was also a long season. La Rochelle beat Lyon quite handsomely, 43 points to 22. Like I said, Gurthro Steenkamp, his good work at the scrums that he's doing at La Rochelle showed. They scrummed very well in the game, and it was an impressive showing by them. Bordeaux, in another close game, beat Bayonne by 30 points to 27. Matthew Jalibert, French 10, played a good game for Bayonne, just mentioning that, even though he's not South African. It was hard to not see him play well. Peter Skolt, South African, played for Bayonne, and Uzair Cassiem, who played last year, also a Springbok player. He did not play this week. That's part of the French rotation system. They're very fond of that. They manage their plays very well, actually. You don't play every weekend. You don't start every weekend. Play off the bench, etc. And that's how players. That's how they manage them, and they do that well. Perpignan, in a very, very close game, beat Pau by 11 points to 10. De La Fuente, the Argentinian centre who holds the record for the most games as an overseas player in France, played for Perpignan. But our own Nicolaas Janse van Rensburg is fast closing in on De La Fuente and may well overtake him and hold the record, which is not to be scoffed at. Marvin, Orie of South Africa, played from the bench for Perpignan and had a good impact when he came on. Cast beat Toulouse by 28 to 23. Yes, the mighty Toulouse, they also lose. Away from France, away from home in France, it's a thing. It's a thing. The refereeing in France is well known. their shortcomings and their ways, and you can see it in the top 14 as well. The French aren't happy with their own referees, but that's their Latin blood. It's not always easy to keep the French happy. Flamand, the French lock, came off the bench for the second consecutive week. It's a bit strange that they don't start him. Could it be that the French national team wants him rested for November? That is a very un-French thing because the clubs don't listen to the national body. But it's possible that it could be in this instance that they're resting him, but I doubt it. I think it's something else. He's supposed to start as a brilliant player. Clermont in the last game of the weekend beat Toulon 19 points to 18. So there were a couple of close games, and that's the nature of this league. Runaway wins are few and far between, and the bottom teams are capable of beating the top teams, but that's usually early in the competition. As it goes on and we go deeper into the season, the teams that struggle, the likes of Perpignan, etc., they start to lose by bigger margins. So this year should be no exception. All right, that's France and how it works there. A quick background and a little bit of the ins. The South African players, we'll keep an eye on every week and give feedback on that and how they're going and how they're doing, etc. There are a lot of them in the second division as well. We'll see if one or two of them stick their hands up there. And then we'll mention that as well. But in the top 14, in the top flight, there are plenty and they're doing well. You know, a guy like Kobus Reinach really comes of age in France. He loves it there. Just a quick note before we move on to women's rugby. We will also look at sevens rugby in this Other Rugby show, Other Rugby podcast. The sevens competition hasn't started yet. It's only in, I think, the last weekend of November when they go. I think, if memory serves, it starts in Dubai. So we'll get closer to that time. We'll start looking at sevens rugby, etc. I'm just mentioning that. But women's rugby. Now, women's rugby is massive in the rest of the world. Here in South Africa, it's taken time to catch on. That it's growing and investment needs to be made, and people need to start looking at people at SOAR need to start looking at women's rugby, and they have done that. They secured a sponsorship with First National Bank, and they've made a 10-year plan. They want to win a World Cup in 10 years. Whether that will happen remains to be seen, but if the men can do it, why can't the women do it? So if we look at what's been happening lately in South African women's rugby. First off, the Bulls, their women's team is called the Bulls Daisies. They are a fully professional team. All the players are professional rugby players, and they full-time invested in rugby. They train full-time. They don't have day jobs, etc. That doesn't work. They are full-time professional rugby players and they have contracts. And it is now beginning to show because our national team, and we'll get to them in a second, has been turning it around. They're doing very well in this WXV competition that's currently going. And I'll explain what that's about. But first, let us just look at what's been happening in Stellenbosch last week, where there was an under 20 festival rugby that's been happening, where the South African team was there. We played against Tunisia on the 21st up, and there was also a Barbarians team, and Uganda was there as well. And I watched the first game of the women, the under 20s against Tunisia, and I was very glad that I did it. It was on YouTube, and it's still there. Just go to the Springboks YouTube channel, and you will find it there. It was a very watchable game, exciting, entertaining. They play good rugby. Two players to look out for is the 9. Boncha is her surname. And our 13 centre, Nadine Creer. Brilliant players. They are really good players. And if you've got this kind of players at under 20 level, then the future is just brilliant. Hopefully this will become, an annual thing. The South African, just to mention, the South African women's rugby, the high performance manager of South African women's rugby, Lynn Cantwell, I had to do with her when I was still involved with Deaf Rugby in South Africa. She impressed me a lot. She is behind this youth week. She arranged it, if I understood it correctly. And it was a massive success. They played it in Stellenbosch down at Paul Roos Gymnasium at Makottefield. And it was good rugby. But let us move on to the Bok women. And what a success story are we witnessing here. They are playing in the WXV competition. Now, just a quick rundown of that. The WXV was born from the fact that the Women's World Cup has expanded from 12 to 16 teams. The next World Cup will have 16 teams. And to get these teams ready, more rugby needs to be played. So the WXV, or the World 15, has been split up into 3 divisions, 1, 2, and 3. The Division 1 is currently being played in Vancouver in Canada and contains the likes of New Zealand, England, Ireland, and France. Now, Ireland was in a bad place until recently, about 2 years ago. They turned the corner. Now, it was a very unfortunate set of circumstances. They played a game, an international game, I can't remember exactly against who it was. But believe it or not, there were not even change room for the women. They had to change at the back of the bus, out of sight of people. And this became public knowledge, and there was an outrage. And the people that were in charge of women's rugby in Ireland at the stage, I think it was 4 people or something, were all sacked. New people were appointed, and they reinvented themselves. The current world champions in women's rugby is New Zealand. Ireland beat them last weekend. So they've gone from these incredible dark depths to beating the current world champions in 2 years. It shows you what can be done. Also interesting, if you look at France, who plays in WXV League 1, they have a massive women's structure in France. All the big teams, the likes of Montpellier, Stade Francais, Racing Metro, La Rochelle, they've all got 2 full women's squads. They've got an A and a B team, the likes of Montpellier. They never play against each other because they play in a first and second division. But most of these clubs have teams in both of these divisions. So their player numbers are exceptionally high. And it comes at no surprise that France is in WXV1 because they invest heavily into their women's rugby. The B, or the WXV2, is a division that I dare say is not to be scoffed at. It's got the likes of South Africa, Australia, Japan and Scotland. Now, just a moment there, Australia, their 7th team is the current world champion. They are the best in the world, even though they had a bit of a shocker at the Olympics, but they win the World League, they win it just about every year. Now, that's 7s, we're talking 15 aside here, but I think it paints the picture that if the likes of Australia, who they call the Wallaroos, by the way, if they are in the 2nd division, that division surely is not to be scoffed at. Also, like I said, you've got the likes of Japan and Scotland. That competition currently is on the go in Cape Town. And then you've got WXV3, who is going on in Dubai. There you've got the likes of Madagascar competing. Now, the Bok women did a bit of a turnaround. Before the WXV started, they played a game. It was the same weekend as the Springboks All Blacks test match in Cape Town. They played a curtain raiser for them against the Barbarians team, a decent Barbarians team, if I may say. I was there, I watched the game, and we beat them by 59 points to 17. That is unheard of. These girls don't win games by that margin. Yet under new coach Swys de Bruin, who we will be having on our other show, Die Losgemal, in a week and a bit. By the way, I'm just mentioning that. This guy has had an immediate impact. And it shows. You don't beat the likes of a Barbarians team with several England players in. And England were defending world champions until the last World Cup, and then they lost in the final in the last movement of the game against New Zealand. That's just to show how strong England is. Now, this wasn't England. This was the Barbarians. But they had a couple of England players in. And we beat them by that score. Then, a week before the WXV started, we played Spain in a friendly. Now, just to quickly pause there and look at Spain. Yes, it is only Spain. But we've played them quite a number of times very recently. And our record against them was something like 50-50, more or less. If we beat them, it's by a point or two. And if we lose to them, it's by a point or two. So the teams were very, very evenly matched going into this game. We beat them by 36 points to 19. That for me was another eye-opener, that this team is undoubtedly going in the right direction. Then in round 1 of WXV2, we played against Japan, beat them by 31 points to 24 in really not good conditions. It was a strong wind in Cape Town, it was a wet field, and it was a bit of a trench fight. What impressed me about that game was our defense in the last 15 minutes. We kept them out. They came at us with everything. Those Japanese came with everything they had, and we kept them out. And I think the team grew immensely from that. Then, last weekend, we played against Australia. It's the first game we lost under Swys de Bruin's coaching, and we lost by 33 points to 26. Our points average against Australia leading into this game was something like 52 or 57 points to 5 in favour of the Wallaroos. We've never scored a try against them, ever. In this game, we scored 4, of which 2 were soft tries. I spoke to our 10, Nadine Roos, after the game. And she said that the team gave them 2 tries, soft tries that we shouldn't have done. I got the idea during the game. She's our best player, by the way. Nadine was by far. She's the fly-off. And I got the idea that the Aussies have figured her out somehow and targeted her. And they neutralized her at crucial times. So I asked her about that, and she said, yes, that is the truth, because one of the technical coaches at the Aussies is a woman with the name of Jill. Nadine played under her, and she knows Nadine and her game, etc. And she can only assume, she said, that Jill must have advised the Aussies about what Nadine is going to bring, and then they made a plan according to that, which I actually told her is a feather in her cap, Nadine's cap, because you always go for your opponent's strongest player. And that's what they did here. So it's a massive up if you look at the whole. We've got these results that are all positive. Even the Aussie result, even though we lost, is a massive, massive turnaround from what we've seen. And we've got world-class players. If I may mention a few, I've just named Nadine Roos. We've got Jaco still here on the wing. She's unfortunately now injured. Janse van Rensburg at 15, who's also a 10, but she's at 15. Vaina Obisi, the 5-lock, excites me to no end. She is all over the place. She's strong, physical, athletic, fast. She's got it all. The centre, the 12 centre, Chuma Kawe, is a pocket rocket. She's extremely strong. She's very, very fast as well, but with strength. She's very hard to bring down. And she's very fast off the mark. And our hooker, Lindelwa Gwala, is also a brilliant player. Brilliant player. Definitely worth it to keep an eye on her. We play against Italy this coming weekend, again in Cape Town at Athlone Stadium. Saturday, 2 o'clock, it's live on Supersport. People are welcome to pull in. That'll be another good game for us, hopefully. And going on what we've seen lately, but we're looking forward to another one. So that's it for this week. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Next week we'll be back with more women's rugby, more top 14. And hopefully you enjoy it and pull in for weeks to come. Cheers.
This is the Other Rugby Pod with Reenen Stenekamp.